All right, today we're diving into one of literature's most revolutionary techniques, stream of consciousness. It's that method writers use to take us directly inside a character's mind, getting past that polite exterior to the messy, chaotic, and brilliant thoughts underneath. So let's break down exactly how they pull it off. Let's kick things off with a question from the literary critic Robert Humphrey, because it really gets right to the heart of the matter. The phrase itself is so evocative, isn't it? It promises innermost confessions, suppressed energy, all these daring experiments. But what does it actually mean when you see it in a novel? Well, if you've ever felt a little confused by it, you are definitely not alone. Humphrey himself calls it one of the most delusive terms out there. It sounds so concrete, but it's often thrown around to mean almost anything, from symbolism to just general interior thought. Honestly, it can feel like you're trying to catch a cloud.
But don't worry, our goal today is to make this whole thing super clear. We'll start by tackling why it can be so confusing. Then we'll trace its surprising origins from psychology to literature, define what's really happening inside a character's mind, meet the masters who perfected it, and finally, see why this technique was a total game changer for storytelling.
So where did this whole literary idea even come from? And what's really fascinating here is that its journey didn't start in an English department. It started in a psychology lab. So the phrase was actually coined by the great American psychologist and philosopher William James. But get this, he wasn't describing a literary style at all. He was trying to describe the actual experience of being human. That constant flowing river of sensations, memories, and thoughts that makes up our inner life. So you can see the progression, right? In the late 19th century, William James gives us the psychological concept. And then in the early 20th century, you have this group of modernist writers who had this absolutely incredible idea. They thought, what if we could put that, the actual flow of thought, onto the page? And that leap from science to art, well, it would change the novel forever. Okay, so what does it actually look like to translate that psychological stream into fiction? I mean, how does a writer truly capture the mind in motion? So here's the crucial point. Consciousness here doesn't just mean a character's logical thoughts or their memories. Nope, it's way bigger than that. We're talking about the entire range of mental activity, from the hazy, half-formed feelings of preconsciousness all the way up to clear, rational thought. And the secret ingredient, the real key, is what critics called the pre-speech level. This is it. Just think about all the stuff that flies through your head before you filter it, organize it, and make it logical for someone else to understand. It's that raw, uncensored, chaotic flow of associations, and that's the territory these writers were so excited to explore. The iceberg analogy is absolutely perfect here. Most fiction before this period was only concerned with the tip of the iceberg, the rational, spoken, and acted upon part of a character. Stream of consciousness fiction, though, that's a deep sea dive. It wants to explore the massive, hidden structure of the mind that lies just beneath the surface. Okay, so we know the what. Now let's get to the how. This is where it gets really interesting. We're going to look at three absolute pioneers, Virginia Woolf, James Joyce, and William Faulkner, and see how they each took this one technique and used it to achieve something totally brilliantly different. First up, Virginia Woolf. Now, for Woolf, this technique wasn't just some clever literary trick to show a character's thoughts. It was a tool for investigating the biggest questions of all. What is reality, and where do we actually find meaning in it? Woolf had this idea that life isn't just a series of neat plot points, right? She saw it as this luminous halo, a constant bombardment of impressions. And here's the big reveal. She believed the real story of a life wasn't in what happens to us, but in the flicker of our inner psychic activity. Her goal was to capture that. So how did she do it? Well, her method was to tune us into the minds of incredibly sensitive characters. When you read a Woolf novel like Mrs. Dalloway, you're not just following a plot. You're literally inside a mind as it flickers between past and present, sensation and memory, all in a search for those rare, beautiful moments where everything just for an instant connects. All right, next up, James Joyce. And this is where things get really interesting because he takes the exact same tool and uses it for an almost opposite purpose. If Woolf was a mystic searching for meaning in the mind, Joyce was a scientist trying to record it. He aimed for what he called a marvelous degree of objectivity. He didn't want to guide the reader or interpret anything. His radical goal was to make the author disappear completely, leaving you totally alone inside the character's head to see the world exactly as they do, with no filter. And his weapon of choice? The interior monologue. In his masterpiece Ulysses, we spend hundreds of pages inside the mind of an ordinary man, Leopold Bloom, on a single day in Dublin. And, the effect is just staggering. Joyce elevates the mundane to the level of myth. A trip to the butcher shop becomes an epic journey. A stray thought feels as profound as a philosophical treatise. He puts you right there. And that brings us to our final master, William Faulkner, who takes us somewhere else entirely. He used stream of consciousness not to find meaning or achieve objectivity, but to plunge us directly into minds that are wrestling with chaos and conflict. See, Faulkner was obsessed with the American South and the decay of its old traditions. And his absolutely brilliant insight was this: to show a society falling apart, he would show us the minds that society had broken. He takes us inside the heads of characters who are haunted, fragmented, and psychologically scarred, mirroring a collapsing world with the collapsing mind. And really, this is where the technique gets pushed to its absolute breaking point limit. In his novel The Sound and the Fury, the entire first section is from the perspective of Benji, a character who cannot speak and has no concept of linear time. Think about that. We are forced to experience the world as he does. A raw, emotional rush of sensations and memories, where the smell of trees can trigger a memory from 20 years ago. It is so disorienting, and it's pure genius. So you have Woolf's search for meaning, Joyce's objective reality, and Faulkner's fractured minds, 3 completely different projects from a single technique. It's just incredible, right? So what was the bigger picture here? What was the impact of all this experimentation? Why was it such a profound game changer for fiction? Well, the answer really lies in this fundamental shift in how writers thought about characters. Before this, a character was defined mostly by what they did and what they said. But these modernists came along and asked a revolutionary new question. What if you could represent a character based on how their mind actually works? So, here's the bottom line. Stream of consciousness was nothing short of a revolution in realism. It made characters deeper, more complex, and just more truthful to our own inner experience. It proved that what happens inside our heads is just as dramatic and important as what happens in the outside world. And that, right there, fundamentally changed what we even expect a story to be. Which of course leaves us with one last really fascinating question. These modernists were trying to capture the mind in a new psychological age, one shaped by Freud and William James. A century later, our minds are shaped by a constant, chaotic flow of notifications, hyperlinks, and digital feeds. So you have to wonder, what does the stream of consciousness look like now? And what new forms of storytelling will arise to capture our inner world? That, I think, is the challenge for the next generation of storytellers. Thanks so much for joining me.